Elena Vasquez walked through the crystal halls of the Galactic Council building. Her soft shoes made no sound on the smooth floor. The walls around her glowed with a gentle blue light that came from somewhere deep inside the crystal itself. She had walked these halls many times before, but today felt different. Today, something was going to change. The other species in the hallway moved aside as she passed. Not because they feared her, but because they respected her. Humans had earned that respect over 300 years of keeping peace in the galaxy. Elena represented Earth and all human colonies spread across the stars. She was their voice in this place where dozens of alien species came together to talk instead of fight. The meeting room was huge. It was shaped like a bowl, with seats going up in circles around the center stage. The ceiling was made of clear crystal that showed the stars outside. Elena could see ships from different worlds floating in space above them. Each ship carried representatives from their home planets. Elena took her seat in the human section. Around her sat beings that looked nothing like humans. The Kethver looked like giant lizards that walked on two legs. Their skin was dark green and covered in scales. Their eyes were yellow and cold. They had ruled their part of space for thousands of years through war and fear. The Zephyrians were tall and thin. They looked almost like smoke given form. Their bodies seemed to shift and change as you looked at them. They spoke by making thoughts appear in your mind instead of using voices. Long ago, they had taken over other species by controlling their minds. The Hive Queens were the strangest of all. They looked like huge insects with 4 arms and wings that never stopped moving. Each queen spoke for billions of smaller insects that lived in giant hives. They had spread across space by eating everything they found and making more of themselves. All of these species had bloody histories. They had conquered, destroyed, and killed to reach the stars. But humans were different. Humans had chosen peace. Councillor Dexran of the Kethvar stood up to speak. He was old, even for his long-lived species. His yellow eyes had seen many wars. When he looked at Elena, she saw something new there, something that had not been there before. The mining dispute on Kepler 442b grows worse, Dexran said. His voice was deep and rough. The Andromeda Syndicate claims the mineral rights. The Outer Colony Alliance says they were there first. Both sides have ships gathering near the planet. Elena had heard about this problem before. It was the kind of thing humans usually helped fix. They would sit both sides down and help them find a way to share the planet's riches. Humans were good at this. They had stopped hundreds of wars this way. What does Earth suggest? Asked Queen Zixara of the Hive Queens. Her voice sounded like many voices speaking at once. Elena stood up slowly. She had prepared for this moment. Earth has tried to help both sides talk. We have offered many solutions, but neither side wants to listen anymore. They want to fight. She paused and looked around the room. Sometimes people must learn from their own mistakes. The room became very quiet. For 300 years, humans had never given up on peace talks. They had never walked away from a problem. They always found a way to make everyone happy. Dexran's yellow eyes grew wider. Earth withdraws from the mediation? Yes, Elena said simply. We withdraw. The silence that followed felt heavy and strange. Elena could feel the other species looking at her with surprise and confusion. Humans did not give up. Humans always tried to help. This was what made them useful to the galaxy. But Elena knew something the others did not know yet. She knew that her people were getting tired. For 300 years, humans had solved everyone else's problems. They had stopped wars between species that had been fighting for thousands of years. They had shared their medicine, their food, and their knowledge freely. They had asked for nothing in return except peace. And what had they gotten for all their work? More problems to solve. More fights to stop. More species who expected humans to fix everything while doing nothing themselves. The Andromeda Syndicate was the worst of all. They were not even a real government. They were pirates and criminals who had taken over several star systems. They stole from trading ships, sold slaves, and caused trouble wherever they went. The Galactic Council had been trying to stop them for 50 years. But all they ever did was write angry letters and make speeches. Humans had suggested real action many times. They had plans that could stop the Syndicate in months. But the other species always said no. They said such actions were too violent. They said there must be a peaceful way. Alana had watched her people's suggestions get ignored again and again. She had seen human trading ships get attacked while the council talked about sending strongly worded messages. She had watched human colonies ask for help while alien politicians gave speeches about the value of patience. "Perhaps," said a soft voice, "this is not such a terrible thing." The speaker was Ambassador Yeltar of the Peaceful Worlds Union. His species looked like tall, thin humans with silver skin and large black eyes. They were the only species in the galaxy that had developed much like humans had. They too had chosen peace over war early in their history. "What do you mean?" Dexron asked. "Humans have carried the burden of galactic peace for 3 centuries, Yeltar explained. "Maybe it is time for the rest of us to take responsibility for our own problems. Maybe we have become too dependent on human wisdom." Elena smiled at Yeltar. His people understood better than most what humans had sacrificed for peace. The peaceful worlds had given up their weapons and armies completely. They trusted other species to protect them. It was a trust that humans had honored faithfully. But trust, Elena knew, was a two-way street. And lately, it felt like humans were the only ones traveling on it. The meeting ended without any real decisions being made. This was normal for the council. They would talk and argue and form committees to study the problem. Meanwhile, the ships near Kepler 442b would move closer to each other. Soon, someone would fire the first shot. Then there would be war. As Elena walked back through the crystal halls, she thought about the message she would send to Earth tonight. The message that would tell her people that their long experiment in galactic peacekeeping was changing. The message that would wake up things that had been sleeping for 300 years. Behind her, she could hear the other representatives talking in worried voices. They were starting to understand that something important had just happened. Something that might change everything. But none of them understood yet just how much everything was about to change. The distress signal reached Captain Sarah Chun at 3 in the morning, ship time. She was in her quarters aboard the Earth Defense Force destroyer Righteousness, trying to sleep after a long day of patrol duties. The sharp beeping of her emergency communicator cut through the darkness like a knife. Sarah sat up quickly, her feet finding the cold metal floor. She had been a starship captain for 15 years, but emergency calls in the middle of the night still made her heart race. She pressed the button on her communicator. "Captain Chun here." "Ma'am, we're getting a distress call from the medical ship New Geneva," said Lieutenant Rodriguez from the bridge. His voice was tight with worry. They were carrying supplies to the plague colonies on Rigel Prime. The signal cut off suddenly about an hour ago. Sarah was already reaching for her uniform. Medical ships were sacred in human culture. They carried no weapons and flew under special protection flags that were supposed to keep them safe from pirates and raiders. Every civilized species in the galaxy respected the medical ships. "Set course for their last known position." "Maximum speed," Sarah ordered. "Yes, ma'am." The Righteousness was not a large ship, but it was fast. It had been built during the early days of human space travel, when the galaxy was more dangerous and humans needed ships that could fight. Now it served mainly as a patrol vessel, keeping trade routes safe and responding to emergencies. Sarah reached the bridge in 5 minutes. The main screen showed the stars streaking past as they traveled through hyperspace. Next to her chair was a cup of coffee that someone had prepared for her. She picked it up gratefully. "How long until we reach them?" she asked. 40 minutes at current speed, Rodriguez replied. Sarah nodded and settled into her captain's chair. 40 minutes felt like forever when people might be dying. She thought about the crew of the New Geneva. She had met some of them at the last medical conference on Luna. Good people who had dedicated their lives to helping others. When they dropped out of hyperspace, Sarah's heart sank. The New Geneva was drifting in space like a dead thing. Its lights were off. There was no response to their radio calls. "Life signs?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. "None, Captain," came the reply from the science officer. "The ship appears to be completely empty." Sarah closed her eyes for a moment. Then she opened them and gave the orders that had to be given. Prepare a boarding party. Full environmental suits. Treat this as a crime scene. The inside of the New Geneva was worse than Sarah had imagined. The medical supplies were gone, of course. Pirates always took anything valuable. But they had also taken personal belongings. Clothes were scattered everywhere. Pictures of families floated in the zero gravity. A child's toy spaceship drifted past Sarah's helmet, spinning slowly. In the main medical bay, Sarah found something that made her stomach turn. On the floor was a piece of paper, written in a child's handwriting. It said, "To the nice doctor who made my arm better," and was decorated with crayon drawings of spaceships and stars. It was meant for Dr. Marcus Webb, one of the best pediatric surgeons in human space. Now he was gone, along with everyone else. Sarah picked up the paper carefully and put it in her suit's storage compartment. This was evidence. This was proof of a crime that could not be forgiven. The investigation took 6 hours. When it was done, Sarah knew exactly what had happened. The New Geneva had been attacked by ships belonging to the Andromeda Syndicate. The crew had been taken alive. The pirates had not even tried to hide what they were doing. They had sent out a subspace broadcast, announcing that they had captured premium human specimens for sale in the slave markets of the Outer Rim. Sarah had seen the broadcast recording. It showed human doctors and nurses in chains, while alien pirates laughed and made jokes about how much money they would bring. The pirates treated it like entertainment. By the time the Righteousness returned to Earth space, the news had spread everywhere. Every human world knew about the New Geneva. They knew about the doctors in chains and the pirates who thought human suffering was funny. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. Representatives from dozens of species gathered to discuss what they called this unfortunate incident. They spoke in careful, diplomatic language about the need for measured responses and careful investigation. Elena Vasquez sat in her seat and listened to speech after speech. The Kethver representative talked about forming a committee to study the problem. The Zephyrian delegate suggested economic sanctions that would take years to put in place. The Hive Queen ambassador proposed a strongly worded letter of condemnation. All the while, Dr. Marcus Webb and 23 other human medical personnel were somewhere in slave markets, being sold to the highest bidder. When it was Elena's turn to speak, she stood up slowly. The room became quiet. Everyone wanted to hear what the humans would say about this attack on their medical ship. "For 300 years, Elena began, her voice carrying clearly across the chamber, humanity has honored the Harmony Accords. We have chosen peace over war. We have solved your disputes instead of our own. We have healed your wounds while ignoring our own pain." She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of every species representative. "We have done this because we believed in something greater than ourselves. We believed that intelligent beings could choose cooperation over conflict. We believed that justice could exist without force. We believed that mercy was strength, not weakness." Elena paused. In the silence, she could hear the quiet humming of the building's life support systems. The Andromeda Syndicate has shown us the truth about mercy without strength. They have shown us what happens when good beings choose to do nothing while evil beings choose to do everything. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a small device. Every species in the galaxy recognized it. It was a formal treaty dissolution transmitter. Humanity formally withdraws from the Harmony Accords, effective immediately. We rescind our commitment to nonviolence. We revoke our promise to seek peaceful solutions above all else. Elena placed her thumb on the device's scanner. A red light flashed, and a signal went out across the galaxy to every human world and ship. "The age of human restraint is over," she said simply. The chamber erupted in shocked voices and panicked chittering. Representatives spoke rapidly to their aides in dozens of alien languages. Emergency calls were placed to homeworlds. But Elena just stood there calmly, watching the fear grow in their eyes. Dexran of the Kethver was the first to find his voice. "Ambassador, surely you do not mean—" "I mean exactly what I said, Counselor," Elena interrupted. "For 3 centuries, you have depended on human gentleness to keep the peace. You have grown comfortable knowing that no matter what happened, humans would choose the path of mercy and forgiveness." She smiled, but it was not a kind smile. That comfort has just ended. Dr. Marcus Webb and 23 other medical personnel are in chains because you chose committee meetings over action. They are being sold in slave markets because you prefer strongly worded letters to actual justice. Elena picked up her things and walked toward the exit. "Humanity will get them back," she said without turning around. "And we will ensure that nothing like this ever happens again." As the doors closed behind her, the chamber filled with the sound of 100 species, all talking at once, all trying to understand what had just happened and what it would mean for their future. But in the depths of space, on worlds and stations and ships across the galaxy, humans were already beginning to answer that question. Admiral Jackson Reeves stood on the observation deck of Mars Central Command and watched the red planet come alive. Below him, massive structures that had looked like peaceful farms and research centers for 300 years were transforming into something else entirely. Jackson was 78 years old and had spent the last 50 years in what the government called educational consulting. Before that, he had been the youngest admiral in Earth Defense Force history. He had planned battles that were never fought and designed weapons that were never used. When the Harmony Accords were signed, his skills became unnecessary. Humans had chosen peace, and peace had no use for warriors. But Jackson had never stopped learning. In his retirement, he had studied every military conflict in galactic history. He had analyzed the strengths and weaknesses of every major species. He had designed theoretical battle plans for wars that would never happen. His colleagues thought it was just the hobby of an old soldier who could not let go of the past. They had been wrong. The message from Elena Vasquez had reached Mars 4 hours ago. 3 simple words. Activate Protocol 7. Protocol 7 was something most humans had never heard of. It existed in classified files that only a handful of people knew about. It was the plan for what humanity would do if the Harmony Accords ever failed. If the galaxy ever forced them to abandon peace and return to war. Jackson pressed a button on his communication device. "All sector commanders, report status." The responses came quickly from around Mars and the other worlds of the solar system. Olympus Mong's facility online. Manufacturing at full capacity. Valles Marineris shipyards operational. First batch of ships launching in 6 hours. Dymas station ready. All stored vessels are being brought out of standby mode. Jackson nodded with satisfaction. Everything was going according to plan. A plan that had been 300 years in the making. The galaxy thought they knew humanity. They thought humans were farmers and doctors and teachers who happened to live on spaceships. They thought human technology was focused on growing food and healing sickness and making life comfortable. They were not entirely wrong, but they were not entirely right either. What they had missed was that humans have learned to make things serve more than one purpose. The massive agricultural domes on Mars were indeed farms, but they were also factories that could be converted to military production in a matter of hours. The peaceful research stations throughout the solar system were indeed studying science, but they were also testing weapons that had never been needed before. The mining ships that collected resources from asteroids were indeed miners, but they were also troop transports and supply vessels that could support a war fleet. The cargo haulers that moved goods between worlds were indeed cargo ships, but they were also equipped with hidden weapon systems that had been installed during routine maintenance over the decades. Humanity had not abandoned their capacity for war. They had simply hidden it so well that even they sometimes forgot it existed. Jackson walked to another window and looked out at the Martian shipyards. What had appeared to be a peaceful construction facility was now revealing its true nature. Massive ships were rising from underground hangars. These were not the comfortable passenger vessels or sturdy cargo haulers that most species associated with human space travel. These were warships, sleek and dangerous, and built for only one purpose. His communication device buzzed. "Admiral, we're getting reports from across human space. All facilities are responding to Protocol 7 activation. What about the other species? Any reaction yet?" "Sir, the Kethver intelligence network is going crazy trying to figure out what's happening. They've detected massive energy signatures from every human world, but they can't identify the sources." Jackson smiled grimly. The Kethver had the best spy network in the galaxy, but it was designed to watch for traditional military buildups. They looked for armies gathering, weapons being manufactured, ships being built. They were not prepared for a civilization that could transform its entire infrastructure from peaceful to military in a matter of hours. "What about our special assets?" Jackson asked. "All sleeper agents are activating on schedule, sir. Luna City Museum is opening its storage vaults. The archaeological sites are revealing their true contents. The historical preservation societies are distributing their artifacts to field commanders." This was perhaps the most clever part of the entire plan. For 300 years, humans had maintained museums of their military history. Schools brought children to see the weapons and ships their ancestors had used before choosing peace. Other species occasionally visited these museums as well, curious about human warfare from the old days. What none of them realized was that these were not really museums. They were armories. Every historical weapon was fully functional. Every decommissioned ship could be brought back to active status within hours. The Luna City Museum of Ancient Warfare alone contained enough equipment to outfit 10 full battle fleets. Jackson's aide, a young woman named Commander Torres, approached with a data pad. "Admiral, we're receiving intelligence reports from our observers throughout the galaxy. What are they seeing?" "Panic, mostly. The Andromeda Syndicate is trying to figure out how to respond to humanity's withdrawal from the Accords. The Galactic Council is holding emergency sessions every few hours. Several species have started moving their fleets to defensive positions. And the medical ship crew?" Commander Torres' face grew dark. "Still in Syndicate hands, sir. Our intelligence suggests that they're being held at the main slave market on Terminus Station. The pirates are treating their capture like a celebration." Jackson felt a familiar coldness settle in his chest. It was the feeling he had learned to associate with necessary violence. For 50 years, he had pushed this feeling down, buried it under layers of peaceful retirement. But it was still there, waiting for the moment when humanity would need it again. "Timeline for Operation Retrieval?" he asked. "Captain Chun's task force will be ready to move in 18 hours. They'll have full support from the new battle groups coming online. Jackson nodded. Captain Chun had requested permission to rescue the medical ship crew herself. Her request had been approved immediately. Some things required a personal touch. "Sir," Commander Torres said quietly, "are we really doing this? After 300 years of peace, are we really going back to war?" Jackson looked out at the ships rising from Mars's hidden hangars. Each one represented thousands of hours of secret planning and preparation. Each one was proof that humanity had never really abandoned their warrior nature. They had simply chosen not to use it. "We're not going back to war, Commander," he said finally. "We're going to end war. There's a difference." On his communication device, reports continued to flow in from across human space. The agricultural worlds were revealing hidden factories. The research stations were activating weapon testing facilities. The peaceful colonies were unveiling defense systems that had been built into their very foundations. And on every world, in every station, in every ship, humans were remembering something they had spent 300 years trying to forget. They were remembering how to be dangerous. The galaxy had grown comfortable with human gentleness. They had counted on human mercy and forgiveness and endless patience. They had built their own peace on the foundation of human restraint. That foundation was about to shift. And everything built upon it was about to come crashing down. Jackson pressed another button on his communication device. This one connected him to Admiral Elena Vasquez, now serving as the military liaison to the civilian government. "Elena, this is Jackson. Mars is fully operational. We'll be ready to begin active operations within 24 hours. "Understood, Jackson. The government has approved all requested measures. You have full authorization to do whatever is necessary." Jackson paused for a moment, thinking about the magnitude of what they were about to unleash. "Elena, once we start this, there's no going back. The galaxy will never see us the same way again." "I know," came the reply. "But after what happened to the New Geneva, maybe it's time they saw us differently." Jackson closed the communication and turned back to watch the red planet's transformation. Below him, humanity was waking up from 3 centuries of peaceful sleep. And when they fully opened their eyes, the galaxy would discover that their gentle guardians had always been apex predators in disguise. Captain Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the Righteousness and stared at the tactical display showing Terminus Station. The massive space station hung in the darkness like a metal tumor, surrounded by dozens of pirate ships. Somewhere inside that station, Dr. Marcus Webb and 23 other human medical personnel were being held as slaves. Sarah had not slept in 36 hours. Since receiving authorization for Operation Retrieval, she had been planning every detail of the assault. This would not be a simple rescue mission. This would be humanity's announcement to the galaxy that the age of human patience was over. Task Force 7 in position, reported Lieutenant Rodriguez from the communications station. "All ships ready on your command." Sarah looked at the display showing her fleet. 37 ships hung in space around her, most of them vessels that had been awakened from decades of peaceful sleep. The Vengeance was a heavy cruiser that had been disguised as a civilian transport for the past century. The Justice and Retribution were destroyers that had spent 50 years pretending to be mining ships. Even the smallest vessel in the fleet, the Mercy, was armed with weapons that could destroy a city. But it was not just the ships that made this fleet dangerous. It was the people operating them. Every captain, every officer, every crew member had been selected for this mission based on their psychological profile. These were humans who understood that sometimes peace required violence. Sometimes mercy required cruelty. Sometimes saving lives required taking them. "Ma'am," called out Ensign Park from the sensor station, "we're detecting movement from the station's defensive fleet. Looks like they've spotted our approach." Sarah was not surprised. Terminus Station was the headquarters of the Andromeda Syndicate's slave trading operation. It would have been foolish for them not to maintain proper surveillance. But Sarah was counting on their confidence. The Syndicate had grown comfortable operating without serious opposition. No government in the galaxy had ever mounted a real military response to their activities. That was about to change. All ships, this is Captain Chun. Execute Plan Alpha. Remember, we need the station intact. Our people are inside. The human fleet moved forward with coordinated precision that would have impressed any military observer. These crews had trained for this scenario for years, running simulations and exercises during their peaceful duties. They knew exactly how to work together, how to support each other, and how to accomplish their objectives with minimum collateral damage. The pirate fleet rushed to meet them, confident in their superior numbers. Terminus Station was protected by nearly 60 combat vessels of various sizes. They had firepower, they had experience, and they had the advantage of fighting near their home base. What they did not have was discipline. The first exchange of fire lasted exactly 4 minutes and 17 seconds. When it was over, 23 pirate ships had been destroyed or disabled. 0 human ships had been lost. Sarah watched the tactical display with cold satisfaction. The pirates had fought like pirates, every ship for itself, no coordination. No real strategy beyond shoot the enemy and try not to get shot. The humans had fought like the professional military force they had always been, even during their centuries of peace. Task Force 7 begins second phase. Remember, precision strikes only. We need to disable their defenses without damaging the holding areas. The battle for Terminus Station itself was even more one-sided than the fleet engagement. The station's defensive systems had been designed to frighten away government patrol ships and rival pirate gangs. They were not prepared for an assault by ships equipped with the most advanced weapons humanity had ever developed. Sarah's ships used directed energy pulses to shut down specific sections of the station without causing widespread destruction. They targeted weapon emplacements, shield generators, and communication arrays with surgical precision. Within an hour, Terminus Station was completely helpless. "Ma'am, we're receiving a surrender signal from the station commander," Lieutenant Rodriguez reported. On screen, the main display showed a tall, thin alien with gray skin and multiple eyes. Sarah recognized him from intelligence files as Admiral Grexnos, the syndicate leader responsible for most of their slave trading operations. "Human ship. You are in violation of galactic law," Grexnos said in accented standard. "This station is sovereign territory of the Andromeda Syndicate. You have no authority here." Sarah smiled coldly. "Admiral Grexnos, I am Captain Sarah Chun of the Earth Defense Force. You are under arrest for crimes against sentient beings. Specifically, the capture and enslavement of medical personnel from the vessel New Geneva." "You have no jurisdiction in this system," Grexnos replied. "The Galactic Council has no enforcement authority outside member space." "The Galactic Council," Sarah said carefully, "is not here, Admiral. We are." She gestured to Lieutenant Rodriguez, who cut the communication channel. "Boarding parties, prepare for deployment. Rules of engagement are as follows. Any being found holding or transporting slaves is to be considered hostile. Any being who surrenders and cooperates will be treated according to galactic prisoner conventions. Any being who threatens or attempts to harm prisoners will be terminated immediately." The assault on Terminus Station was swift and efficient. Human Marines moved through the corridors with the kind of tactical precision that only came from years of training and planning. They had detailed maps of the station layout, provided by intelligence assets who had been operating in Syndicate territory for decades. Sarah led the team that went directly to the slave-holding areas. What she found there made her stomach turn and her anger burn even hotter. Hundreds of beings from dozens of species were crammed into cells barely large enough to hold them. Many showed signs of physical abuse. All showed the psychological damage that came from being treated as property rather than people. In cell block 7, Sarah found what she had come for. Dr. Marcus Webb was sitting in a corner, his medical coat torn and dirty, but his eyes still alert. Next to him were the other medical personnel from the New Geneva, some injured but all alive. "Dr. Webb," Sarah said as her Marines opened the cell door. "I'm Captain Chen. We're here to take you home." The doctor looked up at her with eyes that had seen too much suffering in the past few days. "Captain, there are others here. Hundreds of them. We can't leave them behind." "We're not leaving anyone behind, Doctor. That's not how humans operate." The liberation of Terminus Station took 6 hours. Every slave was freed, every captor was arrested, and every record of syndicate operations was seized. Sarah's intelligence teams found evidence of slave trading networks that stretched across a dozen star systems. They found lists of buyers, sellers, and middlemen. They found everything they needed to dismantle the entire operation. But the most important discovery came in Admiral Grexino's personal quarters. Sarah found him there, trying to destroy computer files that contained information about syndicate, leadership, and their connections to supposedly legitimate governments. "Admiral," Sarah said as her Marines secured the room, "you're going to face trial for your crimes." Grexino looked at her with the kind of fear that came from suddenly realizing that the universe had changed in ways he did not understand. "You humans," he said, "you cannot sustain this. Your people are soft. You have been soft for 300 years. You will grow tired of violence and return to your peaceful ways." Sarah considered this for a moment. Then she pulled out the piece of paper she had been carrying since the investigation of the New Geneva. The child's drawing, addressed to Dr. Webb, with its crayon pictures of spaceships and stars. "Admiral, you made 2 mistakes. First, you assumed that choosing peace meant we had forgotten how to make war. Second, you assumed that being gentle meant we would stay gentle forever." She handed the drawing to Dr. Webb, who was standing nearby. "Humans protect the things we care about, Admiral. We have been protecting the galaxy's peace for 3 centuries. But when that peace fails to protect innocent people, we protect them in other ways." Sarah turned to her Marines. "Take Admiral Grexino to the detention area. He'll face trial along with the rest of his organization." As the syndicate leader was led away, Dr. Webb approached Sarah. "Captain, what happens now? Will this start a war?" Sarah looked around at the freed slaves, at her Marines helping people who had been treated as property, at the evidence of crimes that had gone unpunished for too long. "Doctor, war started the moment they put chains on medical personnel. We're just finishing it." The news of Terminus Station's liberation spread across the galaxy within hours. The complete destruction of a major pirate stronghold by human forces sent shock waves through every government and organization that had grown comfortable with the status quo. Sarah received dozens of communications from Galactic Council representatives, Kethver intelligence officials, and even some governments that had secretly been buying slaves from the syndicate. They all wanted to know the same thing. What did humanity intend to do next? Sarah's answer was simple and direct. Humanity intended to make sure that what happened to the New Geneva never happened to anyone ever again. They intended to hunt down every slave trader, every pirate, and every criminal organization that preyed on innocent people. 6 months after humanity withdrew from the Harmony Accords, Elena Vasquez walked through the crystal halls of the Galactic Council building once again. But this time, everything was different. The soft blue glow in the walls seemed dimmer somehow, and the other species in the hallways moved with nervous energy rather than confident purpose. Elena, no longer represented just Earth. She now spoke for the Terran Federation, a military alliance that included every human colony and station across the galaxy. The Federation ships patrolled trade routes that had been plagued by pirates for decades. Their bases protected star systems that had been abandoned by their own governments. Their courts tried criminals that had been ignored by galactic authorities for centuries. The meeting room looked the same, but the atmosphere was completely changed. Representatives sat in their assigned sections, but many seats were empty. Some species had chosen not to attend this session, afraid of what they might hear. Others had sent junior diplomats instead of their primary ambassadors, hoping to avoid taking responsibility for whatever decisions might be made. Elena took her place in the human section and looked around at the gathered aliens. Many would not meet her eyes. Those who did look at her showed expressions of fear, respect, or sometimes both. The galaxy had learned to see humanity very differently over the past 6 months. The Andromeda Syndicate no longer existed. Captain Chun's task force had methodically hunted down every slave trading operation, every pirate base, and every criminal organization connected to the Syndicate. They had done it with the kind of thorough efficiency that had once impressed alien species when humans were solving diplomatic problems. Now it terrified them, but the Syndicate had not been humanity's only target. Human forces had also moved against the Kethver intelligence networks that had been selling information to pirates. They had shut down Zephyrian mind control operations that had been enslaving entire populations on remote worlds. They had destroyed Hive Queen expansion projects that had been devouring inhabited planets. All of these actions had been justified under what humans called the Protection Doctrine. Any organization that preyed on innocent people, any government that allowed such predation to continue, any species that turned a blind eye to suffering they could prevent, all of them were now considered legitimate targets for human intervention. Counselor? Vexran of the Kethver stood up to address the assembly. He looked much older than he had 6 months ago. His yellow eyes were filled with a wariness that had not been there when humans were still peaceful. The Kethver Republic wishes to formally protest the human invasion of our intelligence facilities, he said, his voice carrying less authority than it once had. These actions violate the sovereignty of our territory and the independence of our operations. Elena stood up slowly. Around the chamber, the other representatives grew quiet. Everyone had learned to pay attention when humans spoke. Counselor Vexran, Elena said, her voice carrying clearly across the room. Your intelligence facilities were selling information about medical ships and humanitarian missions to known criminal organizations. That information was used to plan attacks on civilian vessels. Your sovereignty does not extend to activities that endanger innocent lives. You had no right to make that determination, Vexran replied. But his voice lacked conviction. We had every right, Elena said firmly. For 3 centuries, we asked this council to address such problems through diplomatic means. For 3 centuries, you chose committee meetings and strongly worded letters over real action. Your failure to act gave us the right to act in your place. Queen Zixara of the Hive Queen spoke up from her section. Humans speak of protection, but what you have created is an empire. Your ships patrol our space. Your bases occupy our systems. Your courts try our citizens. How is this different from conquest? Elena smiled, but it was not an unfriendly smile. Your Majesty, our ships patrol trade routes to keep them safe from pirates. Our bases are located in systems that were abandoned by their own governments. Our courts try criminals that your justice systems refuse to prosecute. The difference between protection and conquest is simple. We give you the choice to take responsibility for your own affairs. She gestured to a holographic display that appeared in the center of the room. It showed a map of the galaxy with different regions marked in various colors. Green areas are systems that have established effective law enforcement and no longer require human oversight. Blue areas are systems that have requested human protection and received it. Red areas are systems where human forces had to intervene because local authorities were unable or unwilling to maintain order. Elena looked around the chamber. As you can see, most of the galaxy is now green. These are star systems where local governments have stepped up to protect their own people. They have effective police forces, fair courts, and the will to use them against criminals. In these systems, human ships operate only as invited guests and allies. She pointed to the smaller blue sections. These are systems that asked for our help. Their governments recognized that they lacked the resources to deal with major criminal organizations or external threats. We provided assistance, and they maintained their independence while benefiting from our protection. Finally, she indicated the red areas, which were notably smaller than the others. These are the systems where we had to act without permission because local authorities were actively helping criminals or were too weak to stop them. In every case, we offered these governments the chance to reform their practices and take control of their own security. Most of them accepted our offer. Ambassador Yeltar of the Peaceful Worlds Union raised his hand. His silver-skinned species had been among the first to establish formal cooperation agreements with the new human military forces. If I may, Yeltar said, the Peaceful Worlds have found human protection to be exactly what they promised. Our trade routes are safer than they have been in centuries. Pirate attacks in our space have dropped to nearly zero. And most importantly, humans have kept their word about respecting our autonomy. Several other representatives nodded in agreement. Over the past 6 months, many species had discovered that human protection came with clear terms and reasonable expectations. Humans wanted local governments to maintain order, treat their citizens fairly, and cooperate in fighting organized crime. In exchange, they provided military protection, advanced technology, and access to human trade networks. It was, many species had to admit, a much better deal than what they had been getting from their previous arrangements with pirates, corrupt officials, and predatory neighbors. Counselor Dexran tried one more time to challenge human authority. What gives humanity the right to decide what justice means for the entire galaxy? Elena's expression grew serious. Counselor, we did not choose this responsibility. It was forced upon us when the galaxy's existing systems failed to protect innocent people. When pirates could capture medical ships without consequences. When criminals could operate across multiple star systems without interference. When governments could ignore the suffering of their own citizens without accountability. That is when we knew that the old systems had failed. She paused and looked around the chamber at representatives from dozens of species. 300 years ago, humanity chose peace because we believed that intelligent beings could govern themselves justly. We believed that mercy was stronger than force, that cooperation was better than domination, that patient diplomacy could solve any problem. Elena's voice grew stronger. We still believe those things, but we have learned that peace without the means to enforce it is just a pretty dream. Justice without the will to protect it is just empty words. Mercy without strength to back it up is just weakness that encourages cruelty. She activated her communication device and spoke a single command. Display current galactic crime statistics. The holographic display changed to show comparative data from before and after human military intervention. Piracy incidents had dropped by 97%. Slave trading had been completely eliminated in human-protected space. Attacks on medical and humanitarian missions had stopped entirely. Even common crimes like theft and assault had declined dramatically in systems where human forces maintained a presence. This is what the galaxy looks like when justice has teeth. Elena said simply. The chamber was quiet for a long moment. Finally, a new voice spoke up. It was Ambassador Krentol of the Outer Rim Coalition, a group of independent systems that have been among the first to request human protection. Speaking for the Coalition Worlds, Krentel said, "We formally request that the Galactic Council recognize the Terran Federation's authority to maintain order in space outside the direct jurisdiction of member governments. Our people sleep safer at night knowing that human ships are watching over the trade routes and human courts are ready to try anyone who threatens innocent lives." Several other representatives stood up to voice similar support. Even some species that had initially opposed human military intervention had to admit that the results spoke for themselves. Elena looked around the chamber one more time, seeing the mixture of acceptance, respect, and lingering fear in the faces of the alien representatives.